Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. So, can lying be a good thing? Can lying be something that is necessary in order to fix a sick society, in order to cure our sense of hopelessness, perhaps nihilism? How is it possible to change the definition of something as looked down upon as lying into something which can actually help society and provide us with a life that is more worthwhile, perhaps, and maybe even more moral? I have been reading The Decay of Lying, which is an essay by Oscar Wilde, and I want to thank somebody who commented on a recent video of mine. I would like to thank them so much for recommending that I read this, because I just ate it up. I was reading it online and I printed it out on here and highlighted things. And on here, this many pages is about 17 pages. It's a really quick read. But if you don't know who Oscar Wilde is, we're going to be going through this, and I have quite a bit of notes and an outline. So I'm going to be looking at my laptop pretty frequently throughout this video. But Oscar Wilde was a poet and a playwright. Many of you have probably heard his name, but maybe you don't know what he did or what he stood for. He was a connoisseur, for sure. Through his fictional works and through works like this, essays like this, he was a social critic and a provocateur and an absolute anomaly, an actual embodiment of the spectacle. He's known as one of the pioneers of the aesthetic movement and an advocate for decadence, and one of the ambassadors of dandyism. Beauty and art, they've always been known to us. We've always understood, at face value even, that beauty is pretty important, and art is something that we enjoy, almost all of us. With a man as outspoken and charismatic as Wilde, he's attributed with managing their debut, as the critic and writer Holbrook Jackson once remarked. The debut makes sense because the time in which Oscar Wilde was at his best, which was around the 1890s in London, there was this media storm cloud that ceaselessly encompassed him and other characters of the time, and he practically mastered it as a medium. It would become his downfall in the end, but he had control of it and played with it quite a bit during his lifetime. He knew how to sell something. He knew how to convince anyone of pretty much anything, and he definitely knew how to provoke and used shock to his advantage. He had an absolutely remarkable wit and intelligence, but do not let this confuse you. Just because Oscar Wilde was able to convince you of anything, maybe you could even call him a sophist at some point. Oscar Wilde had beliefs. He was not a contrarian, and his undying belief was in beauty, aesthetics, art. After discussing the picture of Dorian Gray a little bit in my last video, where I talk about appearances, and the quote from a picture of Dorian Gray where he uses his famous paradoxical epigrams, and he said that it is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that type of language in The Decay of Lying. So in this video where I talked about appearances, where I talked about a picture of Dorian Gray, I mentioned how Wilde takes from Huysmans, who wrote Against the Grain, Against Nature, Au revoir. He took from Huysmans, he borrowed this idea that nature is unfinished, or the raw material that is to be translated into artistic, I'm literally quoting this, artistic conventions. He takes that from Huysmans, and this, in The Decay of Lying, is where he very, very clearly expressed that the most, this idea, among many other ideas, which is why this is going to be a long video, because we're going to be analyzing this, and we're going to be talking about so many of the quotes and the concepts that are in this kind of thesis about art and nature. So this essay, The Decay of Lying, is definitely an example of the Socratic method in action. It's two people that are having a discussion about beauty, art, and nature. And this conversation is initiated by the fact that the conversation is between two characters, Vivian and Cyril. And the conversation is initiated by the fact that Vivian does not want to join Cyril and go outside and lay in the grass and smoke cigarettes. And I didn't even know that it doesn't really matter what gender the people are in here, but I had no idea that they were men. These sound like female names to me, so I figured out later that they were men. But Cyril asks Vivian to go outside with them and smoke cigarettes, and Vivian is like, no. And the entire essay is basically Vivian, it stems from this, that Vivian does not want to go outside because Vivian is so consumed in her appreciation for art and her dedication to art that she no longer has any room for nature in her life. And I'm going to be quoting quite a bit from this, and I'll have the quotes up on the screen. She says, he says, my own experience is that the more we study art, the less we care for nature. And this is exactly when Oscar Wilde references Huysmans. What art really reveals to us is nature's lack of design, her curious crudities, her extraordinary monotony, her absolutely unfinished condition. So we then see that this is inspired by Aristotle, when he spoke of how nature has good intentions, but she cannot carry them out. And as for Huysmans, in his famous novel that I mentioned, Rebours, to which Oscar owes this concept, I want to read to you the monologue that Oscar references here, that he alludes to here. Des Esseintes expresses his views on nature and art and says, artifice, besides, seemed to Des Esseintes the final distinctive mark of man's genius. Nature has had her day. By the disgusting sameness of her landscapes and skies, she had once for all wearied the considerate patience of aesthetes. What manners? The manners of the tradesman, offering one particular ware to the exclusion of all others. What a monotonous storehouse of fields and trees. What a banal agency of mountains and seas. There is not one of her inventions, no matter how subtle or imposing it may be, which human genius cannot create. I think that Oscar Wilde does a little bit of a better job, I think, in this essay, not being so clearly disgusted with nature, but it's more philosophical here, and it's more of a discussion than just being grossed out and sick of nature and people and society. Now, artifice is not the word that Oscar uses in this essay, but for the purpose of our analysis here, you could substitute art for artifice interchangeably, for sure. And there are plenty of words, plenty of dichotomies here that we are going to do that with. Correct me if you think that's wrong, but I would definitely say that art is one of the ultimate forms of artifice here. I think it's suitable. But here are some of the words. Speaking of those dichotomies, there are some words here that I think I need to establish before we get into this. There are key words and families that these words are in, and then there are what they're diametrically opposed to. So there's lying, art, mind, God, ideal, and cultivation. And these are all words that I believe are used in here. And their opposites are going to be things like truth, nature, instinct, modernity, realism, and barbarianism. So I think it's good for you to know what words are going to be used and we're going to be talking about what separates these and why they are pitted against each other in here. So this essay expresses a distaste for a kind of modernity that is not too unlike the one that we live in now and the one that I am definitely opposed to. I think that the people in the late 1800s were just as disillusioned with their fellow members of society as people like me or people like us, my subscribers, are with the rest of with the people that surround them as well. There is a almost needless clinging to realism, which I think to the point where it pushes people to hopelessness, as well as losing any kind of passion or courage in order to care about anything at all. So that's why I think that talking about the decay of lying is very much pertinent to our society now. There are people like me this channel, like that are just being slapped with this, you need a reality check, you know, you're delusional, you're living a fantasy world, that's not how the real world is. And I just, like, I've been trying to say this for a long time. We all need illusion. We all need that. We all need beauty. We all need a little bit of a lie in our life in order just to survive. And Nietzsche has said that in The Birth of Tragedy himself, that we need illusion for survival, quite literally. If we didn't have that, we would just kill ourselves. Art, beauty, the lie, the ideals are a kind of panacea for this debilitating, horrible thing that is just reality. In The Decay of Lying, Oscar Wilde proposes a return to lying, to save our culture, to save our world. We are gonna have to do something about this lighting. Okay, all right. So we need to define what Oscar Wilde means by lying. We need to really clearly define what he means by this. It says in The Decay of Lying that the world needs to return to its lost leader, the liar. The lie is the highest form of art and creation, the very embodiment of all human will. The lie is to represent the ideal. You could, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but there is religious context to all of this. And I'm using this because I believe that religion is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I don't ever want to make anybody feel like they should feel ashamed for being religious, because I think that we all have our own kind of religion. We all have this, let's say, if you want to call religion a lie, within the family of the ideal, art and beauty, you know, this great creation, in order to stave off Mother Nature and chaos, then I think that there is a lot of honor in this lie, okay? But those are all in the same family. Religion, a godhead of some sort, something to believe in, the illusion that there is some kind of control, that there is a reason for morality, that there is a reason to believe, to have faith in something good happening at all, that there is a higher power. That is all under lying, what Oscar Wilde means by lying. Vivian goes on to say, the only form of lying that is absolutely beyond reproach is lying for its own sake. And the highest development of this lying is lying in art. And so you may be asking, okay, so what is truth? Truth would be realism. Truth is the bare minimum. It is harsh reality from which we hope to escape from. Against nature, we make these great works of art. We create these systems and these morals and beliefs in hopes of amending or transfiguring or defeating the bare minimum, the true reality, for even a minute, to give us hope, okay? But truth is not a pretty thing. And I don't think that clinging to it, using it as like your main mode of living, oh, I just prefer to like keep things real. It's just like, that's just how it is all the time. It's gonna get pretty dark pretty soon. What is the point? Everything kind of sucks. There's no meaning. There's no point to everything, to anything at all, which is, that's a scary world to live in. That's not a world I wanna live in. That's for damn sure. So now that hopefully we have an idea of what lying and truth are, I'm just going to reiterate one more time those families and their opposites. So you have lying and truth. Under lying is art, mind, God, religion, ideal, cultivation, right? Truth is nature, instinct, modernity, realism, barbarianism, okay? That's how we're looking at it through this essay. I think it's also important, if you read this, you need to understand how Oscar Wilde writes before you read this. Oscar Wilde's rhetoric, and he himself as a person, anything that he's ever done, said, is provocative. And you have to look deeper into what he has to say. Oscar Wilde definitely has a talent at delivering information in a way that seems like blatantly obvious to you in the moment. But it's definitely meant to stun you, to shock you, with its boldness, and even disarm you. And it's a good thing to make videos like this, to look into what he has to say, rather than just taking it at face value. And you have to really, dig through it and see like what makes sense and what doesn't. Oscar Wilde uses decadent language, which is turning things into their opposite. He loves paradoxes. He loves the idea of enantiodromia, which is everything in its extreme becoming its opposite. So much of the things that he says in this essay, through this essay, follow that principle. So Vivian and Cyril are talking, and Vivian is saying, "Oh, I don't want to go outside because I've got a perfectly good house, this creation of man that we've fashioned for ourselves, and they are made for us, and they are she thinks that God, I did it again. He thinks that nature is very uncomfortable and that we have created these situations in order to bypass the discomforts of nature. All creation, such as a house or a work of art, is a product of the mind, and that the mind is in direct opposition to nature. And actually, they say here, nature hates mind." Okay. One of the main concepts of the Decay of Lying is this idea that life imitates art. This idea that everything comes from nature is not true. And Oscar Wilde argues that it is nature that actually imitates art. And this has been a very difficult concept for me personally to understand for many years. I've always heard life imitates art. I mean, like hell, even Lana said it in her, I believe, Art Deco song, life imitates art. Am I right? And I've never been able to fully understand what the hell that meant, because I'm like, of course, art imitates life. Like, of course, that's like the only way that makes sense. However, in an attempt to explain it the way that I was able to understand it, art is the ideal. We're talking about like the chicken and the egg here, okay? We are literally going to a religious, a mystical state of mind when we're talking about life imitating art. So basically, everything started with, let's say, a god or a person, a mind, someone who is creating and perceiving, who has the idea, and then they create it, and then life echoes it back to them. So this idea that art is a means to imitate God or imitate an ideal goes back to ancient Greece through Plato and Plotinus, I believe, with the forms. But also I was reading into some aesthetic philosophy, and there is a period of aesthetics and the philosophy of beauty that is very deeply influenced by religion, by Catholicism and Christianity. And so you had a lot of people that believed art and beauty were second to their appreciation and their love of God, which is represented through the philosopher Augustine, for example, after his conversion. And then you have artists who went out of their way to try and convince people, artists and philosophers who went out of their way to try and convince others of a pious nature that it doesn't have to be, art or God, but that they can exist, that they do coexist, that they are necessary to one another, and that God finds purpose and materialization and manifestation in the world because we imitate him. And this is a way for people to show their devotion to God. And so Giorgio Vasari, the Renaissance painter, was talking about how art is a means to imitate God, and that we imitate God as a way to achieve his perfection, which makes sense. This all goes together with this idea that beauty represents the ideal, and that the great lie is this perhaps unattainable state of perfection, but also it is a way to encourage us to be better, to be more moral, to be more devout, let's say. And so nature is raw material, but that is all that Vivian or Oscar or anybody will admit to nature. Nature is the raw material, but it doesn't begin with nature, like so many people that have discussed the philosophy of beauty would like to believe. I do find it fascinating that beauty doesn't originate in nature, and that it originated in a perception, in a mind, in some kind of exterior person or a figment of some sort. So nature is the raw material and defined by Vivian to mean simple instinct as opposed to self-conscious culture. So we have this dichotomy again. We have instinct and self-conscious culture. Vivian talks about how nature can be cliche the way that a sunset is, for example. That nobody talks about a sunset anymore because it is just so repetitive, and that we no longer are fascinated by it anymore. And I would say that these things are repetitive, and maybe things in nature and our lives are useful and not beautiful, but they are never redundant. Vivian never says that. So that's important to know. However, Oscar Wilde, this is where we tie in this idea, which is in the beginning of A Picture of Dorian Gray, that all art is quite useless. That art is not only superfluous, but uselessness is, again, it's not, you can't take anything that Oscar Wilde says at face value. Is religion useful? Of course it is. Like the whole point of this essay is that lying is useful. But it more so means that we're talking about where on this spectrum something is. The repetition, nature, all this is in the useful. It's in the cyclical, and it's for, let's say, just constant procreation. Instinct is here. It's useless simply because in order to get to this place of uselessness, we have to be comfortable. We have to have the time to think that we are above survival. So you know what I mean? We are not on this side of the spectrum, on this linear spectrum. We are over here in fairy tale world and illusion and lying. And so I'll go back to this idea that everything is done in God's image. Life imitates art. People imitate God. Get what I'm saying there? People imitate the ideal. And Vivian explains this very well. A great artist invents a type, and life tries to copy it, to reproduce it in a popular form. Neither Holbein nor Van Dyck found in England what they have given us. And I don't know who those people are. Those painters, I don't know, but I understand what they mean by this, and a really good painter to discuss when it comes to this idea of teaching people how to see would be Whistler and Whistler's Nocturnes. You know, those really famous muddied looking, sprinkly paintings of fireworks over top of canals in London. Whistler teaches the world how to see. Whistler's paintings, along with every other artist, takes the face value, takes the bare minimum, takes nature, and then teaches people how to look at it in an artistic way. And Vivian says, to look at something is very different from seeing a thing. One does not see anything until one has seen beauty. Then only does it come into existence. No great artist ever sees things as they really are. If he did, he would cease to be an artist. We are going to come back to that, because that nothing even exists until you notice it, until you choose to immortalize it, let's say through art. That is a crazy, crazy thing to say. Again, we will come back to that. But that an artist creates something in the mind, brings it to the world, and then people choose to imitate it. It doesn't originate here, but here is the material to make it happen in this halfway point in between these things. I hope this makes sense. I hope I'm making sense. Maybe I'll just have this candle like right in front of my face or right near me. Let's bring this bad boy over here. Okay, so we will get back to the idea of life imitating art in a second, but I think we need to talk about the idea of art for art's sake, which is the maxim of the aesthetic movement, and lying for lying's sake. Vivian says that the only beautiful things are things which do not concern us. A fine lie is something that which is its own evidence. What? So the best way that I can describe this, and I have spoken about this in different contexts on this channel before, but I'm gonna try and say it as simply as possible. A beautiful thing, an ultimate, the pinnacle of a beautiful thing is something which is unto itself, something which does not require explanation or evidence, let's say in this essay. I have discussed how beautiful people or ethereal people have this disinterested or indifferent nature about them. And it comes from this concept that they do not need anybody else. Beauty does not need explanation. We are given these rules, and maybe we don't understand them, but they speak to us as a higher power. And that is where I guess the hedonism came into the 1890s in London, where hedonism came into the aesthetic movement, the new hedonism. You should live for pleasure, to experience all things. It's beauty for beauty's sake. It's experience for experience's sake. To experience beauty. To experience something which requires no explanation because it is so self-evident. That is a dangerous concept. And it was dangerous to people. But this as an idea is lovely. Whenever we are pushed to our boundaries, let's say we push this to the point of hedonism, yes, it is, bad things happen. Just like when we pushed the boundaries of, let's say, Victorian life and Puritanism, bad things happened too. And there was so much of our energy and our passions that were caged up. There is so much, I think, to be gained from, not a little bit, but like a decent amount of that dislodging, of believing in something that is self-evident, that is, you don't question it, that you just believe. And it's the same feeling that we have whenever we fall in love and people say, oh, there's no rational reason for that. Why would you do that? This person is this or that. And some people, we just say, you know what? I just believe. It's just a feeling. It feels like something bigger than me. That's how people feel with religion as well. And they feel this quite literally physically. They have these moments of ecstasy, and they feel like they're being overcome by something which could never even be explained in human language. This is what Oscar Wilde is trying to talk about when he is speaking about lying. And there is a very important moment where we are talking about religion towards the very end. And it is known whenever you look into the lives of many aesthetes that a lot of them moved to religious life towards the end. Huysmans and Oscar Wilde were both some of these people, because belief in religion is belief in beauty, belief in the ideal, in a God, in something higher than nature and human life. It is this striving to be better and greater, expecting more out of life, and having hope. So it's only natural that the aesthete comes from a hedonist perspective and then somehow works their way and culminates in religion. Vivian talks about it in the end and says, as for the church, I cannot conceive of anything better for the culture of a country than the presence of it in a body of men whose duty it is to believe in the supernatural, to perform daily miracles, and to keep alive the mythopoetic faculty, which is so essential for the imagination. I can tell you probably, if I were to have to tally it up, maybe 8 out of 10 people that I speak to will tell me that they are not religious or that they are openly against religion. And this is where I gotta say, I don't understand. I don't understand the hopelessness. I don't understand the realism. Perhaps I got it before, and I am very well aware, like everybody else who's ever watched the news or read a book or has been alive for longer than, 15 years, will know that the church, as with every religious body of any sort, any mass of people, has committed great atrocities, okay? Everybody has done some kind of crime, I think, in their devotion towards whatever cause. It's possibly inevitable after a certain point. Things decay, things move into decadence, things die. But to say that religion as a whole is ridiculous, I think is, you can say that maybe religion doesn't exist, or that it's a phony, it's a farce or whatever. But okay, What's the alternative then? Why would you want to die hopeless? Why would you want to not believe in the ideal? Why would you not want to, what is so terrible about believing that there is something greater than yourself? That there is something waiting for you on the other side, even if you want to believe in a heaven or a hell or whatever. What is so terrible on the grand scheme of things, and how this essay is able to communicate to us that it's not just about believing in God. It's so much more than that. I myself, I'm not Christian, I'm not Catholic, but I get it. I absolutely get it. And Vivian explains it very well there. This belief in the supernatural, this ability to cultivate the imagination, even to aspire to something greater, to look for what isn't there. Again, the lust for life, just to even try. I get it. It's a great use of time, I think, to be religious in some way. Some ideal, some form of that, I think, is necessary. Absolutely. My ideal perhaps is art and beauty, right? Does that make me a hedonist? Does that make me a bad person? No. And in fact, I actually think that it has pushed me to be a more dignified person, maybe a more chivalrous person, a more gallant person, more courageous, whatever. I think that beauty inspires me to be better every day, not to abuse it, not to exploit it. In order to worship the ideal, right? You don't just worship something, there's so many steps to take. There's religious rites, and there's a way of going about things. There's a respect that you have for this ideal. And once you lose that respect for the ideal, you lose respect for yourself. I truly believe that. You have to believe in illusion, in an ideal, in something that is impossible, perhaps, to do anything at all. And I'm going to be doing a video about how important being delusional is. I mean, even Julia Fox talks about how being delusional helped her achieve things in life and helped her towards success. Because there's a certain amount of the world of this realism that you need to just block the fuck out for a second in order to get anything done. Anything at all. In order to have fun, okay? People who are completely jaded from the world, I don't want to be that. And the antidote to being jaded, to being nihilistic, to thinking that, to being like infected by this obsession with realism is beauty. And in this way, God and art are the same thing. I think that's so cool. And Vivian goes on to say, this is in the end, that man can believe the impossible, but not the improbable. Vivian, earlier on in the Decay of Lying, talks about this, not only the obsession with realism, but with facts and with proof and science, and that man developed a morbid and unhealthy faculty for truth-telling. This idea that truth is somewhat, and modernity, this modern kind of thinking, they're using modernity in this time period, like late 1800s, which is also applicable to how we live now. This obsession with truth and facts and everything. If man believes, let's say, in the improbable, lives and dies by that, he'll die very quickly. Whether it's a spiritual death or a real one. That is an infection. That is an infection of the mind, I think. Just as fantasy and illusion can also be an infection and can lead to all kinds of things, all kinds of mental disorders, true. But I digress. What I want to do to close out this video, we are coming towards the end, and we are coming back to this main theme of life imitates art. So I want to go back to this idea that I was talking about earlier, that there is no such thing as nature being the beginning, but that the beginning is actually an idea, and specifically an idea that is originated in the mind of an artist, and that nothing, quite literally nothing, exists until an artist points it out, which is what? That's nuts. That's crazy, okay? So Vivian and Cyril are talking, and Cyril's like, all right, you've got a lot to say. Your theory is certainly a very curious one, but to make it complete, you must show that nature, no less than life, is an imitation of art. Are you prepared to prove that? And Vivian's like, yeah, of course. And Cyril says, nature follows the landscape painter then. and takes her effects from him. And Vivian says, certainly. Were it not from the Impressionists, do we get those wonderful brown fogs that come creeping down our streets, blurring the gas lamps and changing the houses into monstrous shadows? To whom, if not to them and their master, do we owe the lovely silver mists that brood over our river and turn the faint forms of fading grace, curved bridge and swaying barge? The extraordinary change that has taken place in the climate of London during the last 10 years is entirely due to this particular school of art. To look at a thing is very different from seeing a thing. One does not see anything until one sees its beauty. Then and only then does something come into existence. At present, people see fogs not because they are fogs, but because poets and painters have taught them the mysterious loveliness. This is so funny. There may have been fogs for centuries in London. I dare say there were. But no one saw them, and we do not know anything about them. They did not exist until art had invented them. Art reveals her own perfection, and the wondering crowd that watches the opening of the marvelous many-petaled rose fancies that it is its own history that is being told to it, its own spirit that is finding expression in a new form. The highest art rejects the burden of the human spirit and gains more from a new medium or a fresh material. Crazy, crazy. So it's as if like art, okay, art is being personified here, created into this omnipotent force that's like, oh, I want to be seen. So it's being created into art. It flowers in the mind of an artist, and then the artist creates it here, and then people reflect it back because they then notice it and then perceive it, and then they imitate it, just like they imitate God. So this is this crazy triangle we have here, this like love triangle of the God or like force of this exterior thing of beauty and art, right? And then its impact on the world, not the other way around. We don't look at nature and say, oh, that's pretty, let me take it and make it into an art form. It's not that. But that nature is simply there, here, down here, and the beauty up here is like, hey, this would be a great thing for you to portray me with. Thank you, this, great. Wild, that is crazy. That's the most insane thing ever. Like, how was I ever supposed to understand that before I read this? Oscar Wilde, by the way, is not the only person to say this either. I'm gonna be reading from Roger Scruton's book, A Beauty, A Very Short Introduction here. Art has searched for meaning in the natural world. The experience of natural beauty is not a sense of how nice or how pleasant. It contains a reassurance that this world is a right and fitting place to be. It is as though the natural world, represented in consciousness, justifies both itself and you, and this experience has a metaphysical resonance. Rilke in the Duino Elegies goes further and suggests that the earth too finds its fulfillment in this transformation, achieving, when dissolved in consciousness, the inwardness that redeems both itself and the person who truly observes it. In the experience of beauty, the world comes home to us, and we to the world. But it comes home in a special way, through its presentation rather than its use. So again, you have this idea of like uselessness rather than useful. It's not so much that something is like useless, but it's not just there for being used. It's transcended usefulness to be useless. I don't know about you, but that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting that that art, beauty, ideal very much follows the forms by Plato, except it's personified somehow. Like, I love that Vivian and even Rilke and Roger Scruton, they all talk about art and beauty as if it is a being looking for permanence or representation in the natural world, and that the natural world is simply the raw material in order to do that, but it is not found there. It does not originate there. This is also why, when it comes to, we were talking about earlier, nature and repetition, because beauty and art does not originate in nature, but because it originates outside of that physical form and timeline, that it is timeless, immutable. That's why talking about a sunset is ridiculous, right? But if you transfigure the idea of a sunset into something else, it can infinitely be reused and interpreted and there's new meaning all the time. But like this idea that like nothing is ever seen until an artist or you see it artistically is crazy. That you look at the harbor in London through Whistler's paintings and you never really see the harbor until you look at his paintings. Wild. Nothing exists until it is seen. Okay? You look at things but maybe you don't see them. So we are in a time of modernity, to close out now, right? We are in a time of vulgarity. And vulgarity as in like too real, too natural. And we need to go back to this ancient art of lying. We need to release ourselves from these moors that we've just been stuck in for a while, and this defeated nature. And we need to revive the art of lying, the art of believing maybe in a lie, of having hope. Hope is an illusion, right? Hope is a lie. Do we ever have any kind of scientific confirmation of things like that? No. There's nothing realistic or logical about hope. This type of thinking is needed for right now, for a time of modernity. The Decay of Lying was needed in the late 1800s, and I think it's needed now. But at some point, this should not be the gospel, okay? Just like with everything, ebb and flow. There is a point where this type of thinking, I will admit, becomes very elitist and completely insane and almost like sadistic to a certain point with its exclusions. While I think that differentiation, individuality, solitude even, all of these things and distinction are extremely important, especially right now. There is a limit. And I don't think anybody should follow anything like so fucking closely that you lose your absolute mind to this kind of thing. But I think it's pertinent for right now, just as Vivian says to Cyril. So basically, we're at the end, and Cyril is like completely flabbergasted, convinced of everything that Vivian has said. The final revelation is that lying, the telling of beautiful, untrue things, is the proper aim of art. But of this I think I have spoken at sufficient length, and now let us go out on the terrace, where droops the milk-white peacock like a ghost, while the evening star washes the dusk with silver. At twilight, nature becomes a wonderfully suggestive effect, and it is not without loveliness, though perhaps its chief use is to illustrate quotations from the poets. Come, we have talked long enough. So Vivian goes outside. However, Vivian goes outside because of their own interpretation of how they're going to feel about being outside, right? It's not just to go out and lie in the grass and enjoy nature. Oh, it's about going out and understanding how art can be represented in nature, how art has been translated into the natural world. So why did I just do this insane video? I think we need a lot of beauty right now. We need a lot of illusion. Call me crazy, but I definitely think that people have let themselves go. They stopped caring so much, and they are rewarded all the time for it. They're egged on to do it by whatever, a consumerist, mass-producing society, whatever. I don't care about the excuses anymore. It doesn't matter. Realism doesn't matter anymore. It matters, but you know what I'm saying? I'm being hyperbolic here. Realism is not what we need right now. It doesn't matter the statistics. It doesn't matter when you're gonna die. It doesn't matter about what's happening. It's all about hope now. We need to have some hope. We need to have something to inspire us to be better, not to feel fucking defeated all the time by the constant barrage of facts and what's going on, because truthfully, that is suicide. You need to go out with an open heart, with an open mind, and with optimism, and you need to be a little delusional. And if anybody tries to make you feel lesser or foolish or naive for going out into the world with a hefty amount of illusion or fantasy in your head, then fuck them. Let them wallow in their misery and their constant obsession with reality and realism and facts and, oh, this happened in this way, the possibility of this happening. No, none of that. You don't need that. You need to go in it a little dumb. You really do. Like a child. You need to believe in a lie. That's what I'm prescribing. All right, I think I have more than sufficiently used all of the light that I possibly could have today with an aid. It is dark and it's time for me to go. My throat hurts, but please let me know what you think. Let me know if I did a good job. Let me know if I missed anything, or if I got anything seriously wrong, or if I explained something poorly. Please let me know. I'm more than willing to admit it, or to learn if I got something wrong here. But yeah, please let me know what your thoughts are. If this was executed well, if this made any sense, please let me know. Talk amongst yourselves, reply to one another, say something to one another, if you don't like what somebody said, respond, have a discussion, have a conversation. Even if you don't like what I had to say, if you think I'm mad, that's fine. Go ahead, go off in the comments, please. Yeah, share this video. Read The Decay of Lying by Oscar Wilde. I'm going to provide a link below for you to read it. Yeah, please like and subscribe. And I will see you guys next week. Yeah.